Exercise 6J, we're finding the rule. In question 1, we're given the graph. So we know that the graph has the form A cos nt. So the amplitude for this particular graph we can see from the graph is 3, and the graph is a cos graph that hasn't been reflected, so A must equal 3. We can see that the period is equal to 8. Therefore, 2 pi on n equals 8. So rearranging, we get pi on 4 equals n. Question 2, this time we have a sine graph of the form A sine t, where there has been some horizontal translation. Now we look at the amplitude, and from the centre of the graph to the top we can see that it is 0.5. So if the amplitude is 0.5, therefore A must equal 0.5 because the graph has not been reflected in the x-axis, therefore it's positive. Now to find the value of the horizontal shift, we consider the untransformed graph, which would have had an x-intercept here at the origin. So this whole graph has been shifted from 0 to pi on 3. So we know that epsilon must equal minus pi on 3 in order to ensure it goes in the correct direction. Question 3, we're given some information. We're told that it is a sine graph where there's been dilation from x, dilation from y, and a vertical translation. We know that we have a range from 2 to 8, so that was the range, and we're also told that the period is 2 pi on 3. The range gives us a lot of information. First of all, the midpoint in that range will give us the centre line. So we know the centre line is going to be at y equals from 2 to 8 is 6, so halfway is 3, so the centre line must be at y equals 5, therefore b equals 5. And from the centre line to the top of the graph is the amplitude, that's 3, therefore a equals 3. 2 pi on n gives us the period, and we can see by equating that n must be equal to 3. Once again in question 4 we've got a graph of the form A cos nt. Looking at the graph we can see that the centre line is the x-axis, the amplitude is 4, therefore A is 4, and the period is 12, so 2 pi on n equals 12, rearranging that gives us n equals pi on 6. Question 5, we have a sine graph. And we know some things about it. We know the range is from -4 to 4. The period is 8. And we know that when t equals 2, y equals 0. So we have a point. Okay, so the range tells us that the middle of the graph is the x-axis, the amplitude is 4, therefore a equals 4. The period is 8, so 2 pi on n equals 8. Rearranging that gives us pi on 4 for n. And now we have y equals 4 sine pi t 4. So we know that the point 2, 0 is on the curve, so we can substitute that information and solve. So here we've got pi on 2. Dividing both sides by 4 gives us 0 equals sine pi on 2 plus epsilon. Now sine of what equals 0? We know that we can use 0, so moving that to the other side we get minus pi on 2. make that a bit clearer. Okay, question 6, another sine graph. Right, we're given a range of -2 to 2. And the period is 6. And we're also told that there's a point on the curve, and that point is 1, 1. So let's start with the range. The range tells us that the centre line is the x-axis, therefore the amplitude of 2 gives us a equals 2. Now the period is 6, so 2 pi on n equals 6. Rearranging that, we get n equals pi on 3. Subbing in those two pieces of information, the a and the n, plus the x and y from that coordinate point, we get 1 equals 2 sine pi on 3 times 1. So rearranging here, we get a half sine pi on 3 plus epsilon. So sine of what equals a half? We know that that angle is pi on 6, so pi on 3 is pi on 6. And then it's just some basic fractions, and we get our final value. Number 7, another sine one. This time with horizontal and vertical translations. So we have a range of -2 to 6. The period is 8. And we have a coordinate point, it is the point 2, 2. Starting with the range, we need the centre line. So the centre line from -2 to 6 is 8, so that tells us the centre line halfway is going to be at y equals 2, therefore d equals 2. The amplitude is 4, therefore a equals 4. And the period is 8, so 2 pi on n equals 8, therefore n equals pi on 4. Putting all that information together, we get 2 equals 4 sine pi on 4 times 2, so epsilon, and d was 2, so minusing 2, so 0 divided by 4 is also 0. That's going to be pi on 2. So sine of what equals 0? We can use 0. And we've finished that off. Okay, sorry about that. Last question. Sine. Okay, very similar to the previous one. We have a range of 0 to 4. The period is 6. And we have a point 1, 3, which is on the curve. So from the range, the centre line we can see is at y equals 2, therefore d equals 2. The amplitude is 2, therefore a equals 2. The period is 6, so 2 pi on n equals 6 gives us pi on 3. And plugging that in, we get 3 equals 2 sine pi on 3 times 1 plus 2. So minusing 2 we get 1, dividing by 2 we get a half. And sine of what equals a half? We're going to use pi on 6. To finish that off, pi on 6 minus pi on 3 is minus pi on 6.